This is Larry Novak with Politically Speaking, the most talked about Republican show on the South Shore. You know, I got a couple of calls this week, and I thought they were interesting. They asked me to explain the difference between a Republican and Democrat. Well, a Republican believes in less government, less taxation, and more involvement in their own personal decisions. Individual achievement. They believe that the individual should be allowed to go to his fullest potential. A Democrat believes in more government involvement, more regulations, and that the government should determine where you go from the cradle to the deathbed. One of the big differences for years was the Republicans didn't like to get involved in foreign entanglement. They thought that the wherewithal of the United States, meaning money, should be spent in the United States on infrastructure. Democrats have got us into foreign wars. If you recall, it was the Democrats that escalated Vietnam. It was the 56,000 Americans lost their lives on that thing. It's in the Truman. It was Korea was a Truman War, Democrat. You've seen more involvement in foreign entanglements under the Democratic leadership than you have Republicans. But one of the biggest things is in Massachusetts, the Republican Party's always stood for less taxation. They were the movers behind Proposition 2.5 with Barbara Anderson, who was a lifelong Republican, and Chip Faulkner. Chip recently passed away. He's been battling cancer. He was the last survivor of the original group of CLT. Both Barbara and Chip are gone, and the Chip Ford has moved to, I think it's Kentucky. So you're seeing a passing of an era. CLT was a people's organization that fought for lower real estate taxes and lower involvement by the government in setting tax rates. Those are major issues, differences between the political party. Senator Brady, I saw this week, who proposed an 80% tax increase for the citizens of Massachusetts. That would be ill-advised. It would kill the golden goose that lays the egg, the taxpayers. Those are the major differences between the two political parties. Foreign involvement, the expenditure of funds, deficit spending, which is now, even under Republicans, it's happening. It is not a good thing. The bills are eventually going to have to be paid. And then once they have to pay those bills, it becomes a quality of life issue, which will decrease for future generations. Those bills, when they borrow the money and they go out and bond it, those bonds are going to become due, and we're going to have to pay them. I think that the public should be wary. We are borrowing money against the future. Eventually, they're going to become due. China is threatening to dump all its CDs that it has on American Treasury bills back into the government. It will lower the standard of living in the United States because there will be a rush to pay those. The government will have to pay those bills, liquidating holdings to do that. China is going to retaliate against the United States, and it is a very bad thing. China is an enemy of the United States. Its system of government is communism. Communism, when I grew up, was a very evil thing. It wanted to end the free enterprise where an individual could go as far as they want on their own abilities. It is a sad day when we see young people that don't understand what socialism is. Socialism is the involvement of the government running every aspect of your life. Everybody gets the same. There's no incentive to go to work. There's no incentive to really work hard to achieve anything because you can't accumulate it. Look at Venezuela. That is the epitome of socialism. Left, I can't believe that anybody would find that appealing, that everybody has $500 a month to live on, and that's it. Everything, the government pays for everything else, and you have to live on that $500, and everybody's treated the same, which, it's not appealing. If somebody wants to go out and work 60 hours a week, what would be the incentive? There would be no incentive. France moved into socialistic tendencies, and it found the workforce became unproductive. It is attempting to move away from those to get the workforce back to working more, and so they can accumulate more money. Great Britain went through this when Margaret Thatcher stood up to the unions and shut them down. There were riots with the coal miners. They tried to hold the government hostage. She broke the unions. She saw it through, stayed the course. Britain came back. Britain's economy surged, and its world prestige surged. So I think you should think before you ask for certain things. The Democrats believe that the government should have more regulations to determine what you can or cannot do. Republicans are against over-regulation, over-criminalization. It is a problem in our society. Too many laws have been passed to make sure that we do what the social left wants. Not good politics. It's not good politics. It's not good economic policy. Look at the countries that have failed. Soviet Union under communism. The economy collapsed. There was no individual achievement. Everybody lived in the same little apartments. The systems barely functioned. There was no standard of living that increased. In the Soviet Union, it decreased. Therefore, individual achievement, and they moved now to a free economy under a dictator, Putin. But the economy is freer, and people are given more freedoms to do the stuff in the Soviet Union than they ever were under, the former government communism. Those are some of the major differences. Look at the foreign policy as a major difference. And I say it's very interesting what President Trump did this week. He's going to use tariffs to impose policy in Mexico if they do not stop the illegal immigration into our southern border by adding a 5% tax on all products coming in. That will stem the tide. You'll see the Mexican government move with all haste now to block that. They will try to block immigration coming into the United States. That's another major issue between the two political parties. It never was, but it's now become very political. The Republicans believe that we should not have open borders. The Democrats believe there should be open borders and everybody should come. That's crazy. There should be a rule and there should be a system in place like there is in every country in the world so that if you wish to go live there, you have to play by the rules. Why should someone cross a border, live here illegally, and be allowed to remain here? Yes, we're a humane society, but it's just the rules apply to everybody equally. I think that those are the issues that we need to examine. Those are the differences between the two parties mainly. Look for in Massachusetts, the major issue is taxation policies between the two parties. The Republican Party has led the fight on lower taxations for real estate, lower taxation for personal. Then they have really passed the 5% rate that everybody is. I think it's 5.6 now. But everybody is uniformly taxed at that rate. The Democrats have always looked for more revenue to increase government spending. But, when you look at it, just think about it. Go to the registry a motor vehicle sit there for 4 hours. Is this what you want in the form of government? Something like the registry of motor vehicles where you don't get served very quickly. And it takes hours to get a new driver's license. I would say that is not the formula or the approach to government that you want. I would say that we want to go down and limit government involvement. The Republicans believe in less government and government closest to the people works the best. Democrats believe in more government and bigger government works the best. Two different approaches to how you approach problem solving. Do you think Massachusetts is one of the most democratic states in the nation? Do you think that our roads are better paved because we're under Democratic leadership? Do you think your tax burden is less because the Democrats have led us in the state, in the legislature since the 50s? Do you think that your quality of life issues are better since the Democratic leadership has led you in Massachusetts? I say analyze it and draw your own conclusions. We had, and still do, one of the highest tax burdens in America. We have our school systems are failing in the Commonwealth. They're not as good as other states under Democratic leadership. Why? Because the failed social policies that they have put in place do not work. Do we have more jobs? Is the population increasing drastically in Massachusetts? We have lost 5 congressional seats since the 60s. We were 14 once. We are down to 9 now. That indicates that there is an exodus of population outside of leaving Massachusetts, which is an alarming trend. That means people really don't like the policies that are hoisted on them, and they can go to other places to live cheaper. And I think those are things that the public must consider. Do we have the best medical care? I don't think so. Do we have the best dental care? I don't think so. Yeah, those are the issues to go. Are our costs higher to live in Massachusetts than other states? They are. Our real estate taxes are higher. They keep going up every year. The Proposition 2.5 limited the growth, but now they've found ways around it. Proposition 2.5 needs to be readjusted again so the growth cannot continue. It's time to tell it like it is. Unfunded pension liabilities that the cities and towns owe need to be addressed. When are they going to be addressed? How are they going to be paid? These are questions that the Democrats don't answer. They tell you how everything's going to be great under their leadership. And then it's a cultural thing in the state. The Yankees were not welcoming newcomers into the Republican Party, and they flocked to the Democratic Party, and they continue to remain in the party of their parents, even though the social policies they don't really care for, or the fiscal policies of the Democratic leadership. It was Michael Dukakis that overdrafted the checking accounts $900 million and required the federal government to almost step in. It would have been the first time a state failed for financial reasons. Those Democrats know how to spend your money, but they don't know how to pay the bills. You know, and they pass and set up new bodies of government, and what have they really accomplished? I can't name one thing. I am somebody that believes that in the campaign finance, it should be regardless that you can give unlimited amounts of money as long as it's disclosed. The thing that is needed is the disclosure to see if there's a conflict of interest. When you look at the people that give to the Democratic Party, most of them are special interest groups that are looking to benefit from the power that they hold. That is not helpful. We need to make changes in this. Those are the major difference between the two political parties. This is Larry Novak with Politically Speaking. I can be reached at 508-822-1106. In my second half of the show today, I'm going to be talking about legal aid and how you obtain it, how it functions in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and where you go to get it. We're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors. This is Larry Novak with Politically Speaking. Democrats don't answer. They tell you how everything's going to be great under their leadership. And then it's a cultural thing in the state. The Yankees were not welcoming newcomers into the Republican Party, and they flocked to the Democratic Party, and they continue to remain in the party of their parents, even though the social policies they don't really care for, or the fiscal policies of the Democratic leadership. It was Michael Dukakis that overdrafted the checking accounts $900 million and required the federal government to almost step in. It would have been the first time a state failed for financial reasons. Those Democrats know how to spend your money, but they don't know how to pay the bills. You know, and they pass and set up new bodies of government, and what have they really accomplished? I can't name one thing. I am somebody that believes that in the campaign finance, it should be regardless that you can give unlimited amounts of money as long as it's disclosed. The thing that is needed is the disclosure to see if there's a conflict of interest. When you look at the people that give to the Democratic Party, most of them are special interest groups that are looking to benefit for the from the power that they hold. That is not helpful. We need to make changes in this. Those are the major difference between the two political parties. This is Larry Novak with Politically Speaking. I can be reached at 508-822-1106. In my second half of the show today, I'm going to be talking about legal aid and how you obtain it, how it functions in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and where you go to get it. We're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors. This is Larry Novak with Politically Speaking. Speaking, the most talked about Republican show on the South Shore. I'm going to talk about today a little bit about legal aid because we got a lot of questions I did recently. Legal aid is where the government provides a lawyer for you. You go into the courtroom, you're interviewed on your income level, and the probation determines if it's a criminal trial, if you can afford or not afford a court-appointed counsel. That counsel works for you. And any time that you don't get along with that counsel, you can ask the judge to replace it. That's the prerogative of your prerogative. He has to do what you instruct him or her to do. You know, you can tell them that you want a motion to suppress the evidence filed, they will file it. You can tell them that you want to challenge the government's case against you. You can fight. The lawyer will do what you want. If you're not comfortable with that lawyer, you simply raise your hand and ask the judge to appoint a different lawyer. Just tell the judge that you don't see eye to eye with that lawyer. There's been an irretrievable breakdown in communications. You would not be responsible for it. There was a minimal charge sometimes that the court imposes on people to get a lawyer. Sometimes it's $100. But the lawyer in a criminal case then works for you and tries to argue your position, challenges the government's evidence. Remember, In our society, even though it seems to be fading out, there is a presumption of innocence. It is up to the government to prove your guilt. It is not up to you to prove your innocence. So if the burden is on the government by a preponderance, meaning overwhelming preponderance, of the evidence that you have committed the offense charged by the government, you should contest all these things, take them to trial, and if you lose, you go to the appellate division. They will look at to see if there was an error of law done. Now, when you go in, you're interviewed on your assets, your liabilities, and they determine, if you have the ability to pay. That lawyer then is appointed to be with you at every step of the way. He will then argue your case. He will try to negotiate a plea bargaining with the prosecutor. Or he will file motions to dismiss or motions to suppress the evidence. If the case is not, he doesn't think that, you've made statements that incriminate you, but they were done without the presence of your counsel, he will move to suppress those statements. If those statements are thrown out, the burden would show that you are unable, the government would then unable to convict you. But you must remember at all times, the burden is on the government to convict you. There is a presumption of innocence, and that is being eroded. And anything you say to the attorney is covered by privilege. It's an attorney-client privilege. That privilege is held by the client, not the attorney. You can waive that privilege at any time, and the attorney then can talk about it, or you can talk about it to the prosecutors directly. The prosecution is going to make a plea bargaining offer to you. You can accept it or reject it. You must think of the long-term ramifications if it appears on your record. If it doesn't appear, or even a dismissal appears on your record for the rest of your life. So even if the charges are dismissed, it will show dismissal and the date. The prosecution down the road will try to use that you've had all these breaks and charges have been thrown out. What you should do then is move to seal the dismissal. Then the prosecution can't, without a court order, look at the record. That way that any potential employer is not able to see the record. It is a motion called a motion to seal. They then will seal that record, and they are unable anybody to get it, which is a very good thing for the public. I believe that the system should reform. If somebody's in no further difficulties after 5 years, that the record should be expunged. A new proposal. Expunging of the record. It shouldn't follow people from birth to death. The government should then expunge records after no further involvement with the criminal justice system after 5 years. We need members of the general court to do that. If they did it, it would enhance people's ability to get better employment. The burden shouldn't be on the defendant for the rest of his life if he made a mistake. That should change. Furthermore, if you don't agree and the prosecution offers a poor plea deal, take it to trial. A trial is made up of 6 individuals, and 7 will be sworn in the district court level. They must find you guilty of the charge. If they don't, one of them holds out, it's a hung jury, and the government would have the option to retry the case. Most times the government won't retry the case. In Superior Court, it's a 12-man jury with 1 extra or 2 extra alternates being chosen. The judge in these cases rules on the submission of evidence. Yes, there's an innate bias in the system that favors the government. You should understand that. The government is in a much better position than defendants. What happens is the system circles the wagons and favors that. You have judges that are pro-government. You have some judges that are pro-defendant. And your lawyer will know which judge would be best to hear this case. Some judges have a bias against OUIs. Some judges have a terrible bias against fraud cases. So you need to know the judge you're going before and what his biases are. You can file a motion to have the judge excluded from the case if you think he's biased against you. But the bias must be because of actions he's taken or statements he's made. They won't look into it any further than that. If those statements are not substantial to the case, you just can't get the judge removed. You have to look at all of the evidence in the judge's background and make an argument that you can win. If the judge denies the motion to recuse himself, you can ask the Court of Appeals to review the evidence immediately to see if the judge should be removed from the case. So if you think there is a bias against you, you have a formula to challenge a judge's bias. If he refuses to remove himself after the lawyer files the motion on the memorandum of law, you can go to the Court of Appeals that will review it. And those are very significant things that you can do. This is Larry Novak. You're on the air with Larry Novak.
Larry, how are you? Jay McMahon calling.
Hi, Jay McMahon. How are you?
Good. Are you on the radio right now?
I am on the radio right now, and you are on the speaker line. And how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm listening to your program, and I want to thank you on behalf of the citizens of Southeastern Massachusetts for that very fine legal seminar you just gave us on how we could protect our rights. You're awesome, Larry. Good work.
Jay, I think that we need to teach people about the removal when a judge is biased and the latitude that they have to be removed, and yet you can take it to the Court of Appeals. I have done it, and I'm sure you've done it in the past.
I have. Yeah, absolutely. During my career, I've had dozens of cases before the appeals court. But I got to tell you something, Larry. I actually saw this one time, and this was particularly galling to me. I was waiting for my case to be heard, and there was somebody that was in the court. It was in the district court. I don't want to particularly say where, but here's what happened. The guy got up. He had an agreement. He was by himself. He didn't have a lawyer. He had an agreement with the assistant district attorney for some disposition of a minor criminal case. And the judge refused to accept it. And the guy says to the judge, he goes, "Well, Your Honor, I got this agreement with the assistant district attorney." And the judge says, "Hey," and the judge flips his robes with his two hands and says, "I'm the one with the robes here, and you're going to do what I say." And I remember saying, now there's the case that's got to go up.
Right. I mean, because showed a bias.
He caved.
I mean, he caved in. That's what most people do.
I know.
I mean, when I remember the Bulger case, when they had Judge Stearns thrown off the case, Judge Stearns was furious that they removed him, the Court of Appeals. But it was the right thing to do. He did have a bias. He did.
Right.
He was Ted Kennedy's delegate counter. He's a federal judge, and he had an innate bias against the Bulgers because they were conservative Democrats. He was a very liberal Democrat. So, I mean, it was the right thing when the court found other grounds to remove him, and they ordered the judge removed. When he stormed out, he was furious about it, but it was the right thing to do. If you do these things in an orderly manner, you are helping society. No judge should dominate and give his personal opinions or talk down to the public. He is only there as an arbitrator between the government and the defendant on the rules of evidence.
You're right, Larry. That is exactly it. And to that extent, it's a public servant.
Right.
They work for us. We don't work for them. That building, that brick building that you go into, that brick building is owned by you, the taxpayer. You paid for that thing. And those people all in there, they work for you. You pay their salary.
Right.
And then you have to go and hire a high-priced professional to represent you in your building in front of your employees.
Judge Joseph, as you know, was indicted. I agree with the argument, not what she did, but I agree with the argument that her salary shouldn't have been cut off. There is a presumption of innocence till you're convicted.
Right.
She wasn't given that presumption. They just cut her pay. I mean, which is wrong. I mean, the innocence in our society, and guess we're forgetting this, you're presumed innocent until you plead guilty, and people plead guilty for other reasons than that they're guilty. You are well aware of that.
Absolutely.
And the presumption of innocence is being eroded. As we've both seen, the attorney-client privilege are coming out of the First Circuit. They are eroding those privileges, and the public should be outraged by it. They're there because they knew a president. That's all of judges, or they knew a governor. They're not there because their stellar ability or their legal ability. That never was the case. They are political animals that, work the system to get appointed as judges. And hopefully they...
I was just going to say that the public perception is that he's the smartest lawyer in the building, but that's not the case.
That's not the case.
He knew the governor.
Right, they knew the governor, or they knew the president, or a United States senator to recommend them to the president. And it's political. When you look at their trial experience, Jay, I don't think, you ran for Attorney General, I do not think prosecutors that have never practiced privately should be appointed judges. They have a bias.
You're talking to more than 50% of the judges in Massachusetts.
Right. There is a bias. We have a governor that isn't a lawyer. He doesn't understand that. He doesn't understand that they come in with a bias and the government is always right. Well, the government isn't always right. Look at how the government has screwed up over the years. They passed, years ago, you're separate but equal. So it doesn't make the government 100% right. They pass crazy laws and then they get eroded over time. And it doesn't mean because it's passed, it's only a rule of society. And if the public became more engaged in some of these things, we wouldn't have some of these crazy regulations and statutes. And some of them are nuts. They make no common sense, and they're not for the betterment of society. We
deal with that every day. We deal with that nonsense every day.
And
lawyers do.
Right. And you wonder who really manifested some of this crazy legislation. Brockton recently, Jay, defeated, it was going to be an open city for immigrants to come to. That was defeated. It died in council. And it's a good thing. Sanctuary cities contradict the federal law that governs these policies. Why, going off on tangent, why should we allow cities and mayors and city councils to flagrantly, in the Attorney General, violate federal law? They shouldn't be allowed to do it.
Well, there should be a consequence for it because it is against the law for them to do that. It's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy to violate the laws of the United States, and it's contrary to their oath of office. They take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the laws thereunder, and here they enter into a conspiracy to violate those laws.
Absolutely, and they do violate them. And I was shocked, going back to that other case, that they cut off her pay before she even pled or was found guilty. I mean, that's just outrageous. That's the further erosion of our basic rights in America.
Absolutely.
We are seeing it. The right to bear arms, it gets eroded all the time. I mean, they find loopholes.
Every time the government takes a constitutional issue like guns, every time they take it up and they win the case, it's a further erosion of your rights. And what's particularly galling about the Second Amendment is that the Founding Fathers knew that subsequent governments would arise and would try to break the rights of the people. And so they made a particular precaution by saying in the Second Amendment, shall not be infringed.
Right.
Even though it's infringed constantly and daily.
And you see the erosion because people don't have the resources to challenge it. You
Absolutely right.
And if you go to a step further, when redistricting comes up, it will be in the state packed to give the Democrats the most advantage. Hopefully, this time we will challenge it in court. I think, we would get a different reaction coming up if we were able to challenge some of these districts that are only put in place, and this is about my legal thing here, by the Democrats to keep their hold on power.
Right.
And not good policy. We've lost something along the way. We used to do things to better society. That isn't done anymore. I mean, the attacks on Donald Trump are only done so that he would be eroded and not get reelected. It isn't about what that he's done. The economy is going great under him. Do we all agree with everything he says? Of course not. Do we agree with his approach to attacking people? Of course not. But he doesn't deserve the constant attacks that are orchestrated by the left on him. The constant lawsuits that are filed that are going nowhere. It's the erosion in this partisan divide in America that's going to be the undoing of this country.
Larry, you've said it. You say it correctly, and you say it right. And when I think of it, in particular in Massachusetts, where we got Maura Healey that has filed 50-plus lawsuits against the president, not one of them has accomplished anything. And then just about 2 months ago, she was down in Tijuana personally, having illegals sign documents in order for them to file lawsuits against the Trump administration. I'm like, people, are we waking up here?
And just think of the cost of that.
An attorney general who is going outside the country to fight against this country.
Right. Just think of the cost of that. You have the left has taken over. Socialism is the new mandate of the Democratic Party. There is no conservative Democrat left. There is no moderate Democrat left. It is the left that has taken over their party. It is the extreme positions of the congresswoman from Minnesota in New York that are going to drive this country. They don't even like America.
They don't.
And they're going to drive this country down the tubes. And that's what their goal was. Richard Nixon, said it right. Once they get me, they'll go after the churches, which they have, and they'll try to destroy the faith, and then they'll go after every other institution till they can institute their beliefs. They want to instill their beliefs in everybody. They don't want, I think that people should have the right to choose the way they want to live. And they don't want to do that. They want to determine the way they're going to live. It's a terrible thing. The problem with the Republican Party in the state is that it hasn't raised adequate funds or expanded at the grassroots level. The average age on those committees is old, and they need to go out and spend money You were an excellent candidate. We need to spend money to revigorate the grassroots. Jay?
I agree with all that, Larry. Now, I'm assuming you've probably spoken with Jim Lyons, the new chair. I think he's got great ideas. He talks just like you, Larry. He's a great guy. He says we've got to reach out. We got to get grassroots people. We need to let the conservatives know that they have a home here and the Republican Party of Massachusetts. He's a great guy. I love spending time with him and talking with him.
And he hopefully will expand the base of the party. I mean, we have a lot of dead wood in it that they don't state committee people and city and town chairman and ward chairman, they don't do anything. They need to be moved out to get younger people who are more interested and do not have a defeatist attitude that they can win and they must win.
That's the point, Larry. That's the
our
point
cause is right and just. And if our cause is right and just, we should triumphant. And otherwise, but if you don't believe in those things, you're not going to ever turn the system around. As you saw, I don't know if you saw the Boston Broadside, they did a big article on me this issue in June.
Really? I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up and call you next week and talk about it.
Jay, we are now live on YouTube each week. You can watch this program when you're on YouTube. You go to YouTube, go to Politically Speaking with Larry Novak, and the programs are now up, and you can listen to past programs, and you can see, which we haven't done a mailing yet, but you can see us live. Like today, we are live on TV. And so it's something that generates more. I want you to look at that and sign up as a subscriber to it. It increases the numbers, and it also increases the value of having Republicans on the air. If we are able to do that, we are able to change public opinion. Public opinion is molded by what they hear. Your candidacy, if it had more money, would have been more successful. I mean, it would have maybe won. Her viewpoint is not the viewpoint of the person on the street. It is not the average viewpoint. She is an extremist that is able to raise money because of her sexual orientation and her her extreme liberal positions. And that was the only reason. And I don't think till we get the message out that this is a fight between good and evil, and unless we can move the people over to the side of goodness, the crazy regulations will continue, injustice will continue. The court system is supposed to be fair and unbiased. Well, that's gone out the window. And
right. And that did go out the window.
Right. I have seen it with the president. I mean, he is right when it gets to the Supreme Court. It will be overturned, remanded back with instructions. But he's got to go through all this expense of getting it there. The judges that are appointed by Obama will throw every roadblock in his way. They are more concerned and driven by partisan divide than they are in what's right and just. And unless we fight back, we're going to see the erosion continue.
I know.
And now, Jay, I hear you're often going to gear up for another run.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know that your opponent will be an open seat. She is probably going to be running for U.S. Senate or governor.
Well, the rumor out now is that she's going to run for U.S. Senate coming up.
Yeah, against Markey.
Markey's seat.
Yes.
Going to run for Markey, and if Markey won't run for re-election, if he's got the gall to run for re-election, she'll primary him and probably bury him.
Right, and it will be. What they need to do is get the message out about her extreme positions. She is not in the mainstream of anything. So an open seat, you'll be able to raise more money, generate more money. You should set up a political action committee to help House and Senate candidates. You should be raising money now. It will take a long time to raise adequate funds, 4 years, and you should be doing that on a regular basis. Now, you had an organizational meeting, I heard. I was not able to attend because I was
yes.
On the radio. I hope it was well attended. I heard it was.
It was very well attended, and many people, as I put out the notice to people, I said, I'm not assuming that you're just going to jump on board because you were on board last time, but all positions of the campaign are open, and everything, and I had an overwhelming response. It was great.
Well, that is good, and and if the goal should be to do small fundraising continuously through the year, and to raise enough to keep a little staff and to get your message out and get on the internet and and get on YouTube and all these new social mechanisms to get a message out.
Absolutely.
Because you do have a story to tell, and the story should be told. You offer a different perspective on where you're coming from, but I think it's the perspective of the mainstream of Massachusetts voters if they heard the message. I don't think that Healy represents the mainstream. She represents an extreme element of the left. And her social views are not typical of most people. And her political beliefs are really left-wing.
Right.
And you have our senior senator who's often running for president, and I don't think she's going anywhere.
No, I don't think she's going anywhere.
And I think once she loses, that will take the wind out of their sails for a while. It shows that they never quit. It was 1936, we lost the state auditor's position. We've not won it since. 1948, we lost the Secretary of State's position and not won it since.
Wow, I did not know it was that long for Secretary of State.
1948. Cook was the last.
Holy mackerel.
Cook was the last Republican that actually ran and lost he was an incumbent, lost the office, and we've never held it. 1956, we lost the House, and 1958, we lost the state Senate. Those are the areas that we need to expand. The strength of a political party is determined by your representatives and your state senators, and we need to expand that. Our numbers are terrible. I think we have 6 in the Senate and 32 in the House. Not great numbers.
Not great numbers at all. And when you look at a guy like Jim Lyons, they pulled out all the stops to get rid of him in Andover.
Well, they spent $300,000 versus $150,000 for state rep seats. That's what you used to spend for Congress. Now that's a state rep seat. I mean, I don't think Jim realized what they were going to do. I don't think he thought, he did a good job as state rep, and I don't think that he realized what a fight he was in. He was all...
I think you're right.
Jay, when they target you, you better be always aware they're going after you. They're going to know every aspect of your life back and forward. They use private detective agencies. They use every trick in the book. They don't want to give up any political power.
Right.
And they're not good at things. It's about winning with them. It's not about issues. It's about winning. And if they have to change their position to get elected, they will, and they'll change it back again. How many times have we seen that?
Right.
It is not a good thing at all. And I think it's a bad thing. There were 2 other pieces, Jay, I want you to read. I'll let you know when they're coming out. National pieces on me that they're being written now. They did the interviews in the last week. So I've been very busy. But I thought Lonnie Brennan, I thank him for writing the piece. It was a well-thought-out piece. And it was well done.
Yes. Lonnie Brennan is serving the Commonwealth in ways that the general population doesn't know. He is getting real news out there. It may be controversial, but his points and his facts are true.
And he's starting a new newspaper, the Boston Broadside, so the public knows. Lonnie is funding that personally, and he's not a wealthy man. And he has to sell these subscribers. I think it's up to around 25,000 now. And he keeps going out to hustle. He's a hustler. He's a good writer, and he's doing a service where there is an alternative media outlet that tends to be more conservative. Giving a conservative viewpoint. People should be given both viewpoints and allow them to choose. Do you concur?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And I think those are the main thing. We were talking about, the reason why I'm a Republican because I believe in less government, lower taxation, and more individual achievement. The Democrats believe in bigger government, more government regulation, more government involvement. And I always think of the Democratic Party as the party of the wars. They gave us Vietnam, they gave us Korea.
Right.
And we didn't win Korea and we didn't win Vietnam. They tied the hands of the military, so total victory was never near. Which was, a crazy thing because they wanted to balance it with their political goals. It is, and I try to explain to the public because we are seeing socialism creeping into America, and I don't think they teach what socialism is anymore. When I was,
they don't, Larry. Larry, they don't. If they taught what socialism is, no one would even consider it in this country.
I wouldn't be a socialist because the government determines everything. Look at Venezuela. It's collapsed. No medicines in the hospital. No foods in the shopping centers. The government ceases to exist. Lawlessness in the streets. That's democratic policy for this country. We have a border that is overrun right now with illegal immigrants coming across. He is right to add that tariff on the Mexican goods. It will force the Mexican government to better police the borders.
I agree with that 100%. But Larry, people have said that Venezuela, well, that's socialism gone wrong. No, it isn't. It's socialism done right. That's what you get.
Look at the Soviet Union collapsed because the economy couldn't be stimulated.
Yeah.
Look at the models around the world. They're crazy. That congresswoman in New York is absolutely nuts, and that congresswoman in Minnesota. She is anti-America. She isn't. She's a Somalian, and doesn't. Her whole thing is to bring down the American model. She doesn't care about us. She doesn't.
They don't.
They don't care about the government. They don't care about people like us. He's right on some things. Yes, do we agree with everything in the way he does it? No, nobody agrees with everything everybody does. Could he have said it in a different manner, some of the stuff? Of course he could. But that's Donald Trump.
I know.
You don't change individuals that approach were successful in business. And the New York Times crusade, to destroy his business reputation, I don't think it will work. Businesses have ups and downs. Some years are good and you lose money, and some years you make a ton. And he was very successful at it.
He was, and is.
It is, and they can't take that away from him, even though they're trying. They're trying to destroy his image. Well, Jay, I appreciate it, and if you'd give me a call this week, I'd appreciate it too.
We'll talk
this week because I have a proposal for you, and
okay.
it was great for you to call in. This has been Larry Novak with Politically Speaking, and I will see you next week.